Well, this is another Tech Talk with Paul and Al, and it's just Al today, and we're going to repair a Fender musical instrument reinforcement speaker. And this one's designed for vocal artists or people that have a small band, just to reinforce so the musicians can hear the sounds of the rest of the band. Also, this one has been brought to me, it's relatively new, and the symptom was described as having a thumping or a banging after it was dropped. So we're going to dig into this and see what happened. Well, here's our Fender musical instrument speaker, and the first thing to do is see well, how we get inside of it. And I'm seeing there's 4 screws on the front, but I believe all those are for is holding the grill on the front. And so we're going to take a look around the rest of it. I noticed when I shake it, it has a rattle. And then I'm trying to figure out how to get into this. And I'm seeing what may be a seam right here. So just to see the seam, I'm going to take off these 4 screws, which I think is just for the grill, but that'll at least tell me if we have a seam. So when I'm going to take off 4 screws, that will expose the speaker. Once we do that, we'll have to be careful not to damage the speaker by piercing it with something or so forth. It may be that the way you get into this speaker is by taking out the big speaker in the middle. Some of them are solid cases, and the only way into it is by taking out the speaker and working through the big speaker hole. We'll find that out. And so once we take this off, we can determine if there's a seam or not. And then we just put this right back on when we get done repairing it. I suspect something just broke loose inside. It still works. It still has it's an amplified speaker, and it still works. And so I'm just assuming when it took a fall, something got knocked off its mounting inside. So taking this off, and what I'm seeing is this area here and a heat sink for an amplifier, I guess. And so this appears to be separated here. So if I take this and turn it face down, being careful not to injure the speaker, I see also that I have a box here that I can get into that has the inputs and so forth. And so I might take that out first. I'm seeing these screws around the edges, which would drop the front out if we took all those screws loose. But just to see if we can see what's inside, I'm going to go ahead and take this box, this plate loose that has all the connections, just to see what we're going to run into on the inside before we take loose all those screws that are mounted around the edge. They may not, they probably would just drop the front, we get right in it, but then this may allow us enough access to fix it without having to go into taking the whole front apart. They definitely built it real sturdy. And this is a model 127 OP Fender. So I'm taking this out, or trying to take this is connected from the inside. So I don't see any other screws, and I'm not going to try and force it. And it doesn't appear that it's the knobs or anything. It just appears that this is just mounted here, and it doesn't want to come out just by pulling. So I have to take a look at that. So I guess we'll go ahead and just drop the front off, remembering to put all the screws back in when we go the other direction. This would be a real good time for a powered screwdriver, which I don't have with me, but it would allow us to really get through everything quickly. I'm probably going to stop here and you see what I'm doing with all these screws. There's no need for you to watch me unscrewing all these screws. So we'll cut ahead to where we get all the screws undone, and that way it won't waste your time watching me do all of this, because you got the drill. You have to take loose all these screws. Okay, well, got it apart. It was right, it was the screws all around the edges. This is another example of modern design. I don't know what engineer designed this, but he had to make it incredibly difficult to get into and way too complex to access, and you know, the wires are running all over the place unnecessarily. I guess Fender has just lost their ability to design like they used to in the old days. I mean, it's got a good speaker, and it's got pretty decent circuit boards, and the design of the electronics isn't bad, but it turns out the problem is when it fell, this transformer, which is relatively heavy, was only supported by 2 screws. Well, what do you expect? You know, this is a stage mic, and they were assuming it would never ever be dropped, so they thought it would be safe to mount design the system with just 2 screws holding a very heavy transformer. That, of course, if it fell, inertia would make it come loose from the plywood front panel. So I think the fix is relatively simple. I just need to get a wood screw, and remount this where it's going to stay put. Getting it apart was a chore. It was a pretty stupid design for a company. You know, I don't know why they, you know, there's so much better ways to design this to where it would be easy to work on, more dependable and all that. So, and the thing is, it didn't save many money. The complexity of the design made it unnecessarily expensive to manufacture. And here they're mounting this transformer on wood, which I don't know is a particularly safe thing to do if the transformer ever overheats, internally shorts. And here you've got this potentially flammable transformer on top of a plywood, and they've got this plastic case which it took all those screws to get apart, but then once I got those apart, the whole thing was glued, so you had to work your way around slowly around the edges to break the glue so that you could get in it. And of course, this board here is not removable. They give you enough wire to set it out like I've done here, but there's all these little twist ties that were on here that held it tight, so that you had to actually reach in through a narrow opening and cut the twist ties so you would have room to set it down. That said, I mean, it's got a good speaker, it's got a good transformer, it's got good boards, but it's an incredibly stupid design as far as able to work on it. And I remember back in the day, Fender knew how to build a speaker. This thing it's a good speaker, but why go to all the trouble of making such a complex, stupid design, and then if you want it to be dependable and you know it's going to be dropped, mount this big old heavy transformer with just 2 little wood screws? Not very smart, Fender. But anyway, we got it apart. And so what I'm going to do is I located the screws which stuck to the magnet, and I found the wood screw and a washer, and I'm going to go over here to where it broke and find a new hole, or make a new hole, and attach the transformer back to where, you know, the hole over here was damaged. So I'm going to make a whole new one, and what I'm doing is I'm re-screwing a screw in over here. And let me get the camera and give you a close-up of that real quick. Okay, you can see here, you know, the light isn't that good. The transformer had popped loose, and it was doing this, right? And it had big old heavy transformer only mounted with two screws, and so obviously if it falls, that's going to come loose from the mount. It should have been mounted with 4 screws on the base, but they didn't. And it's, you know, got 110 volts coming in on one side and several different lesser voltages coming. It's a step down transformer. So, you know, that's, I consider that, I put that in the stupid design category. And so we're just going to fix it by remounting it. It doesn't have any additional mounting, so we'll just have to instruct the owners of this particular product to not drop it, or else this transformer will come loose and flop around. And if the other screw hadn't have held like it did, it could have been a serious problem with a short or something. But that said, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take this screw and remount it to the wood, okay? And that should repair this system, or this speaker. Okay, so now that I showed you the close-up, what we're going to have to do is take this wood screw and mount it back in the wood where it'll hold this transformer where it isn't flopping around. What was happening was when the music was playing, the transformer would vibrate, and of course it fell down in the speaker. The screw just fell down in the speaker, and I've recovered it. The transformer would vibrate with the music, causing a rattle, and so we don't want that. So I'm going to remount this with the only other support it has. Fender, what were you thinking? So we're mounting it. I don't know where a lot of these new engineers get their ideas from. I mean, this is way unnecessarily difficult to work on and complex, and actually it's not very elegant at all. So now this transformer is solidly mounted right here, the plywood base. Okay, so now it comes to the chore of putting it back together, and I'm going to go ahead and just set it in where it's right on the edge here, being careful to protect the front of the speaker. You'll notice I put a cloth down to protect the table and the speaker. And another thing they did, which was sort of difficult, was they had a ground here. You know, they required to ground everything, and so they had this ground here mounted to the speaker, so they're running this wire all the way on the other side here, and they have a little screw and a clip, which you just can't unscrew it disconnected. You have to remove the clip, remove the screw. Extra difficulty, Fender. What were you thinking? I mean, I could have designed this, something like this, it wouldn't have had all this difficulty. It would have been a whole lot more elegant and cost a whole lot less money. I think some of the new engineers that design these things don't have any practical experience, which is sort of evidenced by this design. And, you know, they may have started manufacturing overseas or something, I don't know. So we've got reconnecting the ground, because it is important to have the ground connected. And there's a little clip on here. And so the speaker's grounded, that way if someone touches the front of the speaker, they don't get shocked, I guess. So then, once we get that on, everything's more difficult. Okay? Everything becomes more difficult all of a sudden. You have to bring the front up and then tilt so that you have room to actually work in the speaker. So I'm going to go ahead and put the speaker in the bottom edge here. And we've got a little connector here. This is the connector that goes to the board on the side to connect the amplifiers together. See, right here is your amplifier. Uses two big IC chips, one big IC chip, or two big IC chips. One big IC chip, and I guess it's two, even though that one, they're not matching in any way. So this might be a preamplifier over here. I don't know if you can see that. Preamplifier over here, and then a power amp here, and then all the other circuitries and a board inside, and you have this cable that connects it and makes it difficult to, you have to take all this apart before you can even, you know, I guess they don't want anyone to work on it but them. I guess that's the plan. Make it so difficult to get into. So I've got that reconnected. I've got these Now, if we ever need to take it apart again, I'm not going to put straps around this wires, but I'm going to dress these wires when I close it where, and see, here's another problem here. The transformer could short right on the back of this board here, and it will, so I'm going to see how you get around that issue. You know, it's a, okay, so it's got plastic on the transformer which pushes on the board to bring it forward, I guess. But you know, you have to look at how, whenever you do something like this, you have to look at how all the wires go back together and how everything's connected, because you could crimp a wire, you could cause a short. There's 110 volt going to this transformer, there's smaller voltages, and they've got this transformer, you can't see it right here, brushing right up against a board here, this board that's mounted on the back of this. And so when that transformer came loose, they probably could have easily shorted this board and caused a serious problem. Another serious design flaw and safety issue. So we're going to put this back in and let the wires appear. And I'm looking again, since it moved, to make sure that the wires and everything aren't chafing or going to, you know, get pinched where they could short. And then drop that back in. Okay? So once I drop that back in, I'm going to come over here, and before I tighten it down, just in case we have a problem, and see, when I close this down here, that's pushing it right up against the power transformer. So the heat of the power transformer is going to be, there's a little plastic spacer they stuck in here to keep this board, the PC board, from shorting. That wasn't a good idea. It wasn't a good plan, actually. So I have to locate my original screws. They're over here, and I'll start at this corner here, and I will start mounting. And they have clips on all of these. Now I know this board is isolated by a plastic mount, but still I don't think it's a good safety thing to have that transformer brushing right up against the back of the PC board, and only a little bitty spacers is actually separating them. If that were ever to go out, here's another short that's unnecessary. And so you know, there's a lot of designs with these that was already worked out in the 1950s, and I don't know why they have to make everything so complicated, difficult, and a dumb design now. Maybe it was designed by a computer engineer instead of someone with practical experience. I don't know. I should get off my soapbox on that. You know, it does work. It is pretty on the outside, but this whole thing could have been built without having all this unnecessary difficulty with working on it. And I would have expected a better amp section than this, and the little amplifier ICs are not impressive at all on this. You know, when Fender used to make a tube amp, they really knew how to make a tube amp. But this is just way too, even though it's a small speaker, they should have put a little bit better amp in it, I would have thought. So I'll put this last screw in. I got to find the right screw for it. Okay. And so we're going to put this last screw in here. And that's got that mounted. Now that that's mounted, we're going to gently, while that's all put together, fold this down. Oh, that slid out. and it slid out again. So we're going to put it down, and we're going to start mounting these little screws in, and hopefully they will bring it up. We might have to put something underneath it to force this to push up. We'll see if that will bring it up just by screwing it or not. Nope, that doesn't work. So we're going to have to put a screwdriver. I'll pick a flathead that we won't be using. Well, I'll just use this screwdriver. I'll put it underneath here to force it to push up, okay, to where I can get a screw in and get it mounted. Taking this one out to remount it. And so you're going to have to go around, and you have to get it tight because now it doesn't have any glue. I guess I could have put glue back in it, but it seems like when you work on one of these, you want it to actually, and that's supported now, you want to actually be able to get into it without having to tear it apart because someone glued it. These might have been designed as a throwaway item, but if, you know, this much plastic and everything on a throwaway item seems like a waste environmentally when you want it to be able to be repaired for a long time. But it looks like the power amp section of this was designed for a short lifespan, but maybe not. It's just a kind of power amp you'd find in a cheap television or a something that was like $100 inexpensive stereo. So now we've got that side mounted. I'm going to switch it around and drop it again, and then we're going to actually go to the other side and put a screwdriver right under the edge right here just to push it up where we can screw it in. See the screwdriver, making sure you don't put it on the speaker. And once we get the two sides supported, then we can do everything without having to put the screwdriver under it to push the plywood up to where it can be screwed. I don't know how much they paid for this. I mean, there's a lot of work going into this. They make this plastic case and they have everything designed for it, but you know, traditionally when someone had a guitar amp or a musical instrument speaker, it was always designed to be worked on by even the owner, and that means it's sort of incumbent on the manufacturer not to put a large level of difficulty, the difficulty I had in getting this apart. Maybe they didn't want me to go in and see that it wasn't built as good as they should have built it, in my opinion. It looks pretty on the outside. And they would probably argue that the reason they have the glue and all the difficulty was for the acoustics, but you can have good acoustics without having to make it a huge chore to repair. And then again, if you'd built it properly in the first place, you wouldn't have had a power transformer, which is a safety issue, Fender, falling off and coming loose if it falls 6 feet or so. That's why you would want to mount it with 4 screws instead. And the mounting you were using was mounting a transformer onto a wood surface, which wood will burn, so that's weird too. You always want to, I used to do it in the 50s, but you know, one of the things we did get around away from in the 50s and 70s was mounting things that could catch on fire on top of wood. Okay, so now we've got it back together again. I took the speaker apart when I had all that difficulty So I've got 2 screws in it, so I'm going to mount the speaker in with the rest of the screws. And of course we had to do some alignment here to get it just right, to get that screw down into its mount. And this is a good speaker. One thing I did notice is during the fall, the mount for this plate came loose. This screw's loose over here, so I'm going to tighten this back down so that it's not loose anymore, best I can. And up here is the other screw, you know, that needs to be mounted in. They're not using all the screws for the speaker, just 4. So you know it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're using half of the screws to mount the speaker. I guess cost saving. And of course these have to be really turned down so that you don't have the speaker rattling. So I'm putting the last screw in the speaker, and of course I'm not doing this. What you want to be careful when you're doing this is don't let the screwdriver slip and poke a hole in the speaker cloth, or the paper here, or you call it the diaphragm. Then you have a hole in it, and then you have to put some glue on it or something if you haven't made too big of a hole, and then that doesn't look good. And let's see, get that in where it's real tight. And so everything's real tight. Then you can mount this. You have to determine what's up and what's down. There's a handle on this side, so we know this is up. So this F, this Fender F, goes down right here. And you have to align it where you can match the old holes that it had in that way it makes it a lot easier on you. Instead of having to make a whole new hole, you just go into the existing hole that, and sometimes you have to find it. That'll make it a lot easier for you to remount this, have it centered and so forth. See, that's not going down easy, so I have to find the position that's going to go. See, it's going down now. So we found the original hole that was mounting it. I know you can't see through my hand. I got that in there. They need to tighten it down some more. And so I'm going to cut away for a little bit, just so we're not wasting your time watching all these screws being done. So an easy way to test it is to take a little screwdriver and a little alligator clip, turning your volume down so you don't have any surprises, and you go into the mic input, turn it up a little, and that's telling you it's picking up noise through my body, and I'm amplifying it. So that's telling me it's working, and so I know it's working as an amplifier. So there we go, it's repaired.